Congressman LaTourette, thanks for joining us this week.
Yep.
So, wanted to start off on the politics. We had a big week for politics here in D.C. and across the country. Some pretty important primary results this week. I just kind of wanted to tick through some of them with you. Let's talk about what happened in Georgia, particularly in the Republican Senate primary.
Right. Well, you had a self-funder, Mr. Perdue, come out of it as the lead vote getter. And of the three congressmen running, Jack Kingston of Georgia came in second. And because Perdue didn't get enough votes to put off a runoff, there's be a runoff in July, and some of the more ballyhooed, very conservative candidates, the other two members, Gingrey and Brown, they were in the 10% range. And so, it's going to set up an interesting dynamic. My sense is, that of the 7 candidates that were running, clearly these are 2 of the more center-right candidates. But it's also my sense that in order to get over the finish line in July, Kingston in particular, I think, is going to have to hew a little bit more to the right and try and get the support of the very conservative voters who voted for somebody else.
But certainly for national Republicans, these are the 2 candidates they had hoped would make it through to the runoff.
Yeah, no, it's good news for the establishment Republican Party, in that these are the 2 horses that people were rooting for.
Speaking of the establishment, which, by the way, doesnn't seem to be a dirty word anymore.
No, it's not.
Kentucky, Mitch McConnell was probably the most highlighted primary challenge. Obviously, if Minority Leader McConnell had lost, the ripple effect would be enormous. Talk to us about what happened there.
Well, this is one of those things where the lead-up was, much greater than the end result. At the end of the day, Mitch McConnell buried his opponent, who was backed by these conservative groups, Club for Growth and Freedom Works and so forth and so on. And this was supposed to be the key test of the Tea Party versus the establishment, and they were going to take out Mitch McConnell, which would have been a pretty big deal, but again, it wasn't close. And it does point up to the fact that you have, sometimes they rally behind these candidates, in this case Mr. Bevin, who's a flawed candidate. I mean, he roundly was criticizing some government programs that he apparently was for, sort of in the John Kerry-esque moment. He's criticizing Mitch McConnell for being in support of something when he, in fact, prior to running against Mitch McConnell, was in favor of it, and now he's against it. So a bad vetting of candidates, and Mitch McConnell handled them pretty easily.
Well, another race that there was a lot of attention paid to was in Idaho, where Congressman Mike Simpson was facing a very well-funded challenger from his right, backed by the Club for Growth. And Club for Growth had made big proclamations about how they were taking out Mike Simpson. Right. Talk to us about how that ended up.
Well, not so good for the forces that wanted to take out Mike Simpson. And, the change that you're seeing, and so people aren't sleeping anymore. The key to some of this Tea Party electoral success has been they target midterm, low turnout elections. For instance, we talked about the Dave Joyce primary in Ohio last week before. I think the voter turnout was 18%. And so in an 18% turnout model, you really get the motivated voters of the party, Republican or Democrat, that actually turn out. And so they have been able, and with some modest success in the past, to sneak into those things, put a couple $100,000 behind their horse, and that person will skate through and then become the nominee. Not happening. Mike Simpson was supported by the National Rifle Association, the Chamber of Commerce, defending Main Street, and he basically met fire with fire, and he beat him, and beat him by about 20 points.
Well, it wasn't just a bad week politically for some of the conservative organizations. It was a bad week on policy-wise as well.
Sure.
The Water Resources and Reform Development Act.
Right.
Been waiting for the conference report. The conference report finally came out, went to the House. Heritage Action, a big conservative organization here in D.C., key voted the vote saying that it needed to be opposed.
Right.
What happened?
Well, it passed 400 to something, 413 to 4 or some such thing. And that's a pretty big repudiation of those people that wanted the bill defeated, but 2 things. One, the Water Resources Development and Reform Act is how the government authorizes funding for flood control projects, dredging projects in the lakes and the harbors, safe drinking water, sewers, and things like that. Really not hyper-partisan stuff. It doesn't spend any money. It's an authorization bill. And it's really important in terms of getting people back to work and taking care of infrastructure in communities that this bill passed. The fact that, and I think that this ties directly into these primary election results, the fact that you had these primary elections where some of these groups are being a little spanked has caused members not to be as fearful. And if you think that the water bill is a good bill, you're going to vote for it, despite the fact that somebody says, oh, if you vote for it, I'm going to give you an F on your permanent record, or whatever the case may be. And so I think that's a hopeful sign, not necessarily for the rest of this conference because we have an election coming up, but moving forward, I think it's kind of hopeful.
Another issue that's kind of dominated the news here in D.C., outside of just the elections, has been the scandal involving the VA.
Yep.
And I chatted to you beforehand about this, saying that this one feels a little different for me because unlike some of the other scandals, unlike Benghazi or the IRS scandal, those seemed very partisan in nature. This one really, you've heard, concern about it from both the right and the left. Talk to us a little bit about this scandal, and do you think this has long-lasting implications here?
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to have long-lasting political implications for the Obama administration, but I do think it's going to have long-lasting implications. I mean, and I will be surprised if Secretary of Veterans Affairs Shinseki lasts much longer. I mean, this is a horrible story where and it's more than one VA hospital, but the one that's in the spotlight is that there were waiting lists that were manipulated, and apparently if you knew somebody, you got to the top of the list, that people were intentionally denied appointments. The allegation is 30 veterans died waiting for an appointment and care at the VA. And that's not something that the Congress, Republicans or Democrats, are going to sit still for. Obviously the commitment to veterans, both in action and rhetoric, is pretty strong here in Washington. And I think that the president, in order to get ahead of this thing, so that it doesn't become his problem as opposed to just a big problem, is he's going to have to engineer some major changes at the VA, and some heads are going to have to roll.
The final piece I wanted to talk about is just an update on the tax extenders package.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about that over the last few weeks. Yeah. There was actually some things that were looking a little better. We thought that it may actually move in the Senate, and it's stalled. Talk to us about where we are.
At the end of the day, my view is there has to be a tax extender package, because the Congress and the President aren't going to allow all these tax provisions, accelerated depreciation, the work production tax credit and R&D tax credit. They're not going to let these things expire. But the great thing about this program that we do is it shows how fallible we are. It was my belief that at the end of the day, the Republicans would make some noise about Harry Reid's tactics of not permitting them to have any amendments, but would acquiesce because of the importance of these tax benefits. But they didn't. They said, listen, Senator Reid, you have to give us some amendments. We have to have the opportunity to talk. And what they really want to talk about is the Keystone Pipeline, among most others. And so now my understanding is there are negotiations between Senator McConnell and Republicans and Senator Reid to try and figure out, one, if Senator Reid will allow amendments, and if he'll allow them, what they are, and if that then satisfies the Republicans so that they can then move forward with the bill.
At the end of the day, though, do you still feel pretty confident that we're going to have a deal on extenders? We're
going to have a tax extender deal before, I would think before July the 4th. And many of them will be made retroactive to when they expired. You should never say never, but I am hard pressed to believe that they would let this happen.
Well, we will see in the weeks ahead then.
Perfect.
Thank you very much, Congressman.
Thank you.